Okay, so what exactly is sociology? I know it's a burning question. Sociology, defined, is the scientific study of human social behavior and social structure. Sociologists never focus on the individual. That's psychology. Sociologists always want to focus on the group, so they're always going to focus on a group or a social perspective rather than an individual's perspective. So what exactly are sociologists looking at? They're looking for patterns within social relationships and within social groups. So they're ultimately attempting to explain the same event that happens in society without relying on personal factors. They want to look at patterns and trends of categories of people. So let's take the issue of divorce. A psychologist may look at how a woman, an individual woman, how she divorces her husband in order to develop her full potential. But a sociologist would take that same situation and say that married women are getting divorced because of the social trend towards social equality. So they're going to look at the same social phenomenon, but possibly you're going to look at it a little bit different than what a psychologist would. We're looking at how society is handling a particular phenomenon, not how individuals are focusing on an individual phenomenon. And that's where the sociological imagination comes in. The sociological imagination is what allows sociologists to take this perspective. It's the ability to look beyond the individual as a cause for success or failure and to see how our society can influence the outcome. It helps us to understand how history and social structure can impact people, and it allows us to see social issues from personal viewpoints. So if we take a particular trend in U.S. history, throughout America's history, American society has shown a strong bias against childless or one-child marriages. Couples without children have been considered selfish. Only children are considered spoiled. This ideal of having multiple children is a value that has been around in U.S. society for a very long time, back when large families were needed for survival. So the sociological imagination allows us to look at what it is in society that is pushing families to have more than one child. Another example, or at least showing the distinction between personal troubles and public issues, is a really important part of the sociological imagination. We have to be able to look beyond the personal to see how things are functioning in society. And I think a really easy way to look at this is an individual, in this case me, personal troubles with food. And this is certainly an issue that many Americans are having today with the obesity epidemic. And so an individual may have personal troubles with controlling his or her eating habits. Okay, and those are things that are occurring within the individual, and it happens within his or her immediate relationship to others, and those things can be resolved by the individual. I don't eat healthy food, but I could start eating healthier food. But I have my own personal troubles with that because I don't like vegetables, and certainly those are some of the most healthy foods you can eat. So if you want to eat healthy but you don't like vegetables, then that's a problem that I personally will have to resolve. But we can also look at obesity as a public issue, as a social problem, and things become public issues or social problems when our values or cultural norms are important to the public that's being threatened. And any time there is an issue that can be considered a social problem, it requires public debate and cultural change. So if we take the issue of food and look beyond the individual and look into the forces in society that are enabling individuals within the society to become obese, we can start to see where maybe some societal problems are originating in order to possibly solve the issue on a societal level. So if we look at food, if we think about how often people will eat fast food in the United States. And if we look at some of the types of food that is available from fast food restaurants, it's generally very unhealthy, very processed, and unfortunately very much goes into people's problems with food. Think about the holidays that are a very important part of our cultural norms, right? If we think about Thanksgiving and Christmas, generally these are considered family holidays. And family holidays are often taking place around a table that is filled with food. If you think about Thanksgiving, that is centered around a large meal that everyone comes to, and it's usually really fatty foods that are involved in that. Christmas, yes, there is the present opening, and sometimes there's breakfast with cinnamon rolls and other things, but then there's also a meal that is happening there. And even something like Easter, after you go to church, generally go to a really big brunch buffet. So these types of things are ingrained in our society, and it makes individual personal troubles with food exacerbated by the cultural values that we tend to keep. So how do we determine what is a social problem? You have to look at the context of our time. Is this something in our history right now that we consider to be, it's a progression of social problems, and this is something that concerns people here in the United States right now, and does it impact our ability to determine what is right or what is wrong? Right? Social problems vary over time. The definition of what a social problem is 100 years ago is very much different from what we would consider to be a social problem now, because there's an evolution of change, right? And it's all about kind of striving to be a perfect society. And so problems are inherent in societies, and we always want to try to solve those. And our value and belief structures are also constantly changing. So what would have been considered a wrong behavior in the 1950s very much now could be considered an acceptable and right behavior. So we very much have to take into consideration what the context of the time is and work within the context of our time and the social structure that we have at a certain time to fix these social problems.